Hello everybody and welcome back. We are at round 12 of the Pittsburgh Regional Championships today. This is the final win and in. The player that wins this game will be moving on to the top cut. The player that doesn't will not. Their run will end. And we have Thomas Hayden versus James Evans. These players are bringing sun versus rain, one of the most classic matchups that you could possibly have in VGC. However, if you did take a look at Thomas Hayden's little team preview here, this is an incredibly interesting team with Charizard with the Terra Fire, Choice Scarf, Solar Power, Heat Wave, Overheat, Air Slash, and Fire Spin, trapping opponents on the field. Hatterene with the Terra Fire, Covert Cloak, Magic Bounce, Dazzling Gleam, Expanding Force, Skill Swap, and Trick Room. Indeedee Female with the Psychic Seed, Terra Ghost, Psychic Surge, Trick Room, Follow Me, Helping Hand, Dazzling Gleam, makes sense so far. And then also a Rillaboom. You very rarely see a Grassy Surge and Psychic Surge user on the same team. Terra Grass, Life Orb, Grassy Surge, Wood Hammer, Grassy Glide, Fake Out, and High Horsepower. This is an offensive Rillaboom through and through. You also have Torkoal here to take advantage of the Trick Room with the Terra Fire Choice Specs, Drought, Eruption, Heatwave, Fissure, and Weather Ball, and then Ursaluna to round things out with the Terra Ghost, Flame Orb, Guts, Facade, Protect, Earthquake, and Headlong Rush. So, Torkoal having the Choice Specs means Charizard does have that Choice Scarf. Normally, Charizard would carry those choice specs. We've seen it more recently with the Silva Sun team, where Charizard wearing choice specs, and also with the Rillaboom wearing that Life Orb. So this is an intriguing team here. Again, kind of follows along with a lot of Regulation H stuff. Relatively standard Pokemon, some that are a little bit more odd, but some very interesting sets, things that are not normal with these Pokemon, especially with Hatterene. Having Covert Cloak on the Hatterene, when normally you wouldn't really need it because it's almost always going to be paired with Indeedee for that Psychic Surge, so you stop moves like Fake Out anyways. There are obviously other things that Covert Cloak stops, but really the number one thing is that Indeedee. But on the other side here, we have James Evans, Whimsicott with the Terra Steel, Covert Cloak, Prankster, Moonblast, Encore, Fake Tears, lower special defense, and Tailwind. Basically, Jamil with Terra Ghost, Focus Sash, Adaptability, Liquidation, Last Respects, Aqua Jet, and Protect. Very interesting that it's Adaptability, not Swift Swim, considering that there is a Pelipper here with the Terra Ghost, Choice Scarf, Drizzle, Weather Ball, Hurricane, Icy Wind, and Muddy Water. Are Chowdon as well, also with Power Herb. So again, I guess not really bringing Pelipper all that much. With the Terra Electric, Sturdy, Electroshot, Draco Meteor, Flash Cannon, Protect, Goldengo with the Terra Fighting, Life Orb, Make Your Rain, Shadow Ball, Terra Blast, and Protect. Terra Blast fighting Goldengo, I like it. And then Incineroar rounds things out here. Another very aggressive Incineroar, or at least more aggressive. Terra Ghost, Assault Vest, Intimidate, Fake Out, Flare Blitz, Knockoff, and U-Turn. Again, the more standard Incineroar that we have seen throughout the times in Regulation H so far has been a bulkier Incineroar with the Citrus Berry, maybe with the safety goggles, having Parting Shot, having Fake Out, Knockoff, more supportive moves in general. Will-O-Wisp potentially. Protect on some, but this Incineroar with Fake Out, Flare Blitz, Knockoff, and U-Turn is much more aggressive. And honestly, if you are Thomas Hayden, this Incineroar poses quite a bit of a problem. You have your Hatterene, you have your Indeedee Female. Those Pokemon don't like going up against Incineroar. Incineroar does great into Rillaboom. Incineroar intimidates Ursaluna. Incineroar resists basically everything that Torkoal and Charizard have, except Torkoal has Fissure, right? That can one-shot anything, so it's really, not much of an import either way. This is an incredibly strong Pokemon up against Thomas Hayden. And specifically, I mean, if you're James Evans, you can probably all but count out that Trick Room, or at least that hard Trick Room mode with Indeedee and Hatterene from even coming, right? While you can't fake out the Incineroar necessarily up against Indeedee, that knockoff and even the U-turn do insane damage. So that simplifies things a lot for James Evans. And if you're Thomas Hayden, you have to be prepared for that Incineroar, and then you have to also be prepared for the rain mode. You have to be prepared for the clear non-rain mode that James Evans can bring to this. So let's see what these players start with. Goldengo and Incineroar is the start for James Evans. I'm not shocked there at all. Thomas Hayden actually does bring the Psychic duo here. Hatterene and Indeedee both make their way onto the battlefield. Psychic Surge is live. Okay, I'm interested to see how this goes. Knockoff live for Incineroar. Can get rid of the Covert Cloak. It won't do super effective damage to the Indeedee, but Indeedee's special defense is boosted, not the regular defense. Goldengo is still here. That does block Goldengo a little bit, but Goldengo's Make It Rain will still do a ton of damage into Hatterene, unless Hatterene goes for the Terastallization here. So if you are Thomas Hayden, you're almost priced into going for that Terastallization. And if you're James Evans, okay, now you do have to worry about Trick Room, but can you just get damage out outright? Terra comes through. Hatterene does go for the Terra Fire here, but here's the notable thing, right? Shadow Ball from Goldengo would be just as effective into this Hatterene, except it also would play around the fire attack. But Indeedee with the Follow Me here, this is nice. I don't think James Evans is going to be able to get a one-hit KO with this Make It Rain, especially after that special defense boost. Yeah, Indeedee above half HP. Hatterene only takes about a quarter of its HP, and that is going to be Goldengo's special attack falling. Incineroar now gets to go for some damage. Knockoff comes through. It doesn't get rid of Indeedee's item, but it puts Indeedee down to 5 HP. Honestly, if you're James, I think you are okay with that. Indeedee's not going to be doing all that much, but it is a little bit annoying with redirection and things like that. You don't have taunt on this Incineroar, as we have seen some have in the past. Now, Hatterene can start getting some big damage off. Dazzling Gleam is probably going to be its best bet. Incineroar is otherwise immune to Expanding Force, and we see James Evans not going for a swap here yet. Dazzling Gleam comes through. This is going to do neutral damage to both these Pokemon. Doesn't do nearly enough. Knockoff into the Hatterene here takes it down to 33 HP. The Covert Cloak is gone. Make It Rain here should do just enough to both, and Thomas Hayden loses both of these Pokemon incredibly early into this match. I mean, this is exactly what you're worried about, right? If you were bringing this Psychic Team duo, right? Like, both Pokemon go down in the same turn, and Incineroar takes, honestly, minimal damage, and you lose both of your Pokemon. You haven't even seen the other two Pokemon from James Evans. You do get Trick Room up, which is nice, and you can now set up grassy terrain, so you have your own Fake Out active. Torkoal is in a decent spot here. It can go for eruptions and things along those lines, but honestly, now if you're James Evans, you can swap out the Incineroar, cycle in another Fake Out, get some Protects off. You're going to be in a good spot long-term in this, I think. Goldengo, honestly, here, I think you go for Protect. Incineroar tries to potentially go for a U-turn or just goes for a hard swap here. Goldengo could even go for a swap. Incineroar, being aware of the Fake Out potential, goes for, goes for a U-turn, then goes for a U-turn again on the next turn. Rillaboom only has so much damage, and notably, Rillaboom is probably going to be faster than this Incineroar. So the moves, if all Pokemon attack here, the move order should be Torkoal, Incineroar, Rillaboom, and then Goldengo. And I don't think Incineroar is going down to just an eruption here. It's an aggressive Pokemon, but it has the Assault Vest here, and it's a fire type. It resists it incredibly well. So Torkoal gonna really struggle against this. Incineroar does just swap out here. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Protect on the Goldengo, or honestly, if you're James Evans, you've kind of gotten the work done that you need to with it. Ooh, I like this. Pelipper coming out onto the battlefield here. This tells me that we're probably going to be protecting on the Goldengo here, trying to preserve it a little bit longer. It is at -2 on its special attack, but it should still be able to get some good damage done. Rillaboom isn't really going to be able to do much into it outside of high horsepower, which really, if you're James Evans, you can terrestrialize away from. And the Pelipper notably does take that incredibly well, and the Woodhammer goes into the Goldengo slot. Interesting. I guess Thomas does have high horsepower on this Rillaboom. I guess if you're anticipating the Goldengo to swap out instead of the Incineroar, Pelipper would be the most sensible choice, and Pelipper would take quite a bit of damage from that Woodhammer, but Pelipper came in on the other side. Now, Goldengo does swap out this time around for James Evans. I imagine this is just going to be Incineroar making its way back out onto the battlefield again, and Intimidate onto the Rillaboom feels really good, and of course that sets you up for Fake Out into the Torkoal on the next turn. And as we've seen, Torkoal is doing minimal damage into the Pelipper turn over turn here. Heat Wave comes out from the Torkoal, takes Pelipper down to about half HP. Incineroar feeling fine. That is a critical hit. Okay, that makes more sense here. I know I said minimal damage and then it goes down, but we should be fine. Pelipper falls to the Woodhammer. Even then, you've reset the Goldengo stats. You have Fake Out active on the Incineroar. I think there's only one turn left of Trick Room after this, so Torkoal isn't even going to get to move on this next turn, and its damage is still going to be dampened by the rain. James Evans has lost the Pelipper, but Pelipper has already done its job more than enough. You still have Pokemon number 4 in the back. It could be, honestly, anything. Our Chaladon here could be fine. Our Chaladon, I guess, would probably be the worst of your options. Basculegion could still get some work done, and in the long run, Incineroar should win out against this Rillaboom. But it is just going to be the Goldengo coming out onto the battlefield anyways. Again, above half HP. Trick Room should only have one more turn. James Evans can go for the Protect on the Goldengo here, and then Incineroar can go for a knockoff onto the Torkoal, greatly reducing its damage output, getting good damage onto it, and then again, turn over turn, this Rillaboom should fall. That said, yeah, you don't have Flare Blitz right now. Rillaboom, I say that Rillaboom might be a little bit difficult to deal with here. That it doesn't have Assault Vest. It's not going to be taking Make It Rains nearly as well. This thing should fall relatively easily. It's taking Life Orb damage as well. Yeah, it should go down after a couple of turns here. Goldengo does go for the Protect here, not wanting to take, again, high horsepower or any significant damage. The Fake Out from the Incineroar goes into the Rillaboom, making sure that it's not going to move. Heat Wave from the Torkoal does nothing into Goldengo's Protect, and again, is going to do, a pittance of damage against this Incineroar. So again, that should be the last turn of Trick Room. Rillaboom does flinch here. We're going to get some HP restoration. If this isn't the last turn to Trick Room, then this gets a lot harder for James Evans very quickly, but it should be. Yeah, okay, yeah. There we go. So, Make It Rain now, a massive threat for James Evans. You're going to be able to do so much damage here. Knock off into the Torkoal, I think, is the move you need to make. Rillaboom should be relatively easy pickings from here on out for whatever Pokemon you have in the back. Rillaboom should move next, which is pretty big, but no, Incineroar actually does move next. This Rillaboom is either, So this Rillaboom is certainly not max speed. I guess this Incineroar is, again, it's a Soul Vest Incineroar. You can invest more into those offenses and the speed, but that's honestly impressive that the Incineroar actually outsped the Rillaboom. I probably could have figured that out if I'd paid attention, but I hadn't really before. I just assumed Goldengo does get burned here. So it will be going down, but... Oh, wait, no, never mind. It might not be. Hold on. Grassy terrain heals. Burn should take it down from this point. Incineroar, though, going to be able to do more than enough damage. Oh, wait, wow. Goldengo does survive. Okay. Well, all right, that's really it then. If you're Thomas Hayden, you're not beating the combination of these two Pokemon, and the battle is canceled. That is going to be a 1-0 to James Evans so far. Going into game number 2, I mean, really, like, if you're Thomas Hayden, you just go down so early. If you lead with that Psychic duo, that Expanding Force duo, you're just not going to be able to get a lot of work done. I really think, like bringing in, like, getting Trick Room set up, I think is important, but you don't have a clean way to pivot into Torkoal or even Ursaluna in the back, which honestly, I think Ursaluna is the way to go. You can still do a lot of damage to Pelipper, and High Horse or Headlong Rush and Earthquake still do a ton of work up against Incineroar, up against Goldengo, up against our Chaladon. You still have really good damage against those Pokemon. Rillaboom does make sense, so I don't know. I mean, you could even go Hatterene, which has Trick Room, plus Rillaboom. You have your Fake Out user, you have Hatterene. You're worried about Goldengo, but you can Terastallize, and then Rillaboom could potentially switch out. It doesn't have U-turn, though. If it did, that could be a good swap, but I'm talking about pure hypotheticals that we don't have. If you are Thomas Hayden, you are a hard Trick Room user, you need to get Trick Room up, but bringing both those Psychic-type Pokemon is just going to make it a lot more difficult for you in the long run. So let's get into it, see if we see any swap-ups here for either of these players. James Evans leads the same, and Thomas Hayden does lead something different. Okay. Rillaboom and Indeedee female, both on the battlefield at the same time. Indeedee is faster than the Rillaboom. That is not something that you see every day. Indeedee does get a special defense boost, which is pretty big. Rillaboom's Grassy Surge comes through. Fake Out is available for both of these players. Now, the main thing to worry about, though, if you are Thomas Hayden, is that Incineroar is definitely faster than your Rillaboom, and can definitely Fake Out into the Indeedee. Even if you click Fake Out as Rillaboom, you're not going to get the damage off. Goldengo is going to be able to attack one way or another. It's going to be able to get a Make It Rain off. It's going to be able to get a Shadow Ball off. Fake Out goes into the Rillaboom, actually. Okay. James Evans just playing bold here. Make It Rain comes through. Rillaboom down to 30 HP. This does mean Indeedee's going to get Trick Room off here. I think this is a little bit of a better spot here, honestly, if you are Thomas. You can still use Follow Me on Indeedee. It can take a couple of hits still. And Rillaboom actually has some pretty good damage pressure on both of these Pokemon. I know Thomas is a little bit hesitant to go for a high horsepower into either slot in case you get blanked by a Pelipper, but honestly, I think you just kind of have to go for the damage here and there. I think Incineroar swapping out is the most likely move, but if you can get damage out with this Rillaboom, like, you are an aggressive Rillaboom. You have damage. Heck, you can even go down to Life Orb if you really wanted to. Like, with the combination of Wood Hammer plus Life Orb, you might be able to actually go down and get a safe switch in at the end of the turn for Torkoal or Ursaluna in the back. We do see the Indeedee swap, though. It does stay on the battlefield, or it doesn't stay on the battlefield. Torkoal comes through. This thing is still in a spot where it might take a ton of damage. Knockoff coming in here would not surprise me. High horsepower from the Rillaboom does go into the Incineroar, takes it down to about a third of its HP. That is big. We do get some Life Orb recoil. Rillaboom's going to be on the field for one more turn. Never mind. U-turn takes it out, and Incineroar gets to swap out. What is this Goldengo going for? I imagine it's going to be another Make It Rain, but notably, James Evans saw this Torkoal come in and now gets to bring in Pelipper and set up the rain. This is another really, really pesky spot for Thomas Hayden. Your Torkoal's already on the battlefield. Sun is already set up, but a Pelipper here would overwrite the weather. You would be in a really tough spot to get good damage out. Obviously, this Goldengo can still do work, but that can very easily swap into Incineroar. It can Terastallize, and we can even see Pokemon number 4. Again, Basking Legion coming in here. It's a fast Pokemon. You wouldn't necessarily want to see it, but it'd be plenty of damage. Okay, and that is what we see. Basking Legion makes its way onto the battlefield. I think if you're James, or if you're Thomas, I think that read is that Pelipper is probably swapping in for Goldengo on the next turn. At least I think that would be the guess. But what do you bring in now as well if you are Thomas? Torkoal is going to be the slowest thing on the field. It's going to have damage. But, okay, it is going to be that Ursaluna, but it's not going to be able to trigger Guts at the end of this turn. It's going to need one more turn. Protect here would be kind of the necessary move. What are we going to see from James Evans, though? That is what I am intrigued about. Again, bringing in Incineroar, I don't think is unreasonable. Basking Legion does resist the Fire-type moves that Torkoal has. and does have Focus Sash, so it's staying up no matter what, essentially. It could get doubled up by the Ursaluna, but I really doubt that. I am assuming we would see Protect from the Ursaluna, just in case there's a swap into the Pelipper and whatever water type moves the Basket Legion wants to go for. We saw it KO incredibly tanky Pokemon with just a flip turn in the rain. Although I guess it was Terra Water Choice Band in the rain, so it probably is a little bit different here. We do see the Torkoal swap out for Thomas, but I think that means we're not seeing any swap from James here. No water, no Pelipper coming in. Indeed, he does set the Psychic Terrain here, so no priority for at least until, or actually no Rillaboom comes in. All right, never mind. The Gholdengo does swap out. All right, yeah, that's what I figured. That's what I figured. I looked at Thomas, seen a little bit defeated here, thinking that his Pokemon was going to be the last to swap out, but that is not the case. Pelipper makes its way onto the battlefield, and the rain begins here. We do see the Terastallization. I think this is Thomas's Terastallization right now. Yeah, it is going to be that Ursaluna going into the Terra Ghost here. I'm about to say Terra Poison. Terra Ghost. Now, if James made an incredible call, we saw either, I don't remember if it was the last match or the match before, where our friend on the other side was making incredible damage. It is Headlong Rush into the Pelipper. That is really, really tough. That's kind of exactly what Thomas was trying to avoid, but it's the Liquidation into the Ursaluna, takes it down to about a quarter of its HP. The burn comes through. Ursaluna has only a couple of turns to get damage out. It's now incredibly vulnerable to Last Respects, and honestly, for James, you have the option of swapping out the Pelipper into Gholdengo potentially. You have the option of protecting. Actually, does Basket Legion have Protect? I don't know. You can't go for Aqua Jet though. That Psychic Terrain is going to be a little bit pesky there. Notably, I think Pelipper is going to be relatively okay unless we get hit by Facade, unless Pelipper specifically gets hit by Facade Dazzling Gleam. But then you're just leaving this Basket Legion to do whatever it wants here and get plenty of damage out. Headlong Rush does come through. It goes into the Basket Legion here. It takes it down to its Focus Sash. Dazzling Gleam on the Basket Legion now. That is going to do some damage, but of course it does leave Pelipper still to get work done, and Pelipper is not honestly is not a slouch in Regulation H. It can still do some good work. Dazzling Gleam comes through. Basket Legion goes down. It doesn't do all that much into Pelipper. Now Pelipper gets to go for something like a Weather Ball, a Hurricane, potentially even a Tailwind, as Trick Room is going to be going down here in a turn or two. It is just going to be that Weather Ball. It's going into the Ursaluna. That is going to take it down. And that's going to leave Thomas Hayden with the Torkoal and Indeedee left. Meanwhile, James Evans is going to have Gholdengo and Pelipper. Now, the big thing is, Thomas Hayden is finally going to have the weather advantage. Torkoal is coming in when both players are down to their final two Pokemon. That means Sun is going to be up and it's going to stick around. However, how many turns does Trick Room have left? Even if it's only one more turn, this Gholdengo is going to be in a good spot. It can go for Protect, and then it can go for a Shadow Ball potentially into the Torkoal. And all Pelipper has to do is take out this Indeedee on this turn. So it looks like there is still one more room of Trick Room left. If you're Thomas Hayden, you have to get damage out, but you need to KO this Pelipper. All right, nope, Incineroar, never mind. All right, Incineroar is coming back in now. Again, Thomas Hayden just briefly has this weather advantage here. Are you going to be able to do enough? Honestly, I think Dazzling Gleam plus Weather Ball into that Pelipper slot might have been the choice here. Helping Hand, though, into the Torkoal. This is going to be a pretty big whatever it is, and the Gholdengo does go for Protect here. This should outlast this final turn of Trick Room. Heat Wave comes through. Does it hit the Incineroar? Even if it does, that Pelipper is still going to be able to come back in safely. The Heat Wave does take out the Incineroar, so Thomas Hayden, you're able to get that last KO, and it is a critical hit. That critical hit might have mattered there, but again, one of those situations where maybe that Incineroar is sticking around for a turn. Well, no, not with Trick Room swapping out. All right, so now it is Pelipper and Gholdengo with the speed advantage against a Torkoal and an Indeedee. Torkoal's Eruption not going to do nearly enough. The rain comes through. I mean, Thomas Hayden can go for Follow Me. Heat Wave, maybe try to throw out a Fissure or two. A Weather Ball here isn't nothing. Or actually, no, you've already locked into Heat Wave, so it's Choice Specs Heat Wave all the way here, and that's just going to get completely neutered by this damage. Weather Ball does go into the Indeedee here. This is going to be a stab water type move. Indeedee does survive on 5 HP. Make It Rain comes through. Torkoal does resist it, but not nearly enough. Torkoal down to 28 HP here is going to need some massive damage, but it just will not be there. James Evans should have this all wrapped up. Torkoal does go for the Heat Wave. It does hit both Pokemon. Is super effective on Gholdengo. Takes it down to a quarter of its HP. No burn. Not very effective on the Pelipper here. All it needs to be now is a Weather Ball and a Shadow Ball. And I mean, this will be it. James Evans winning the Weather War 2-0 here. Moving on to the top cut over Thomas Hayden. That was a fun match to watch, mostly in that you got to see the dynamics, kind of the inherent weakness of Sun teams to these rain teams, sun teams, you have Torkoal, which is a slow trick, or a slow trick room based Pokemon that sets the sun and is weak to water type moves, versus a water type team or a rain team that is speedy, is quick, doesn't need trick room up, doesn't really need that much speed control to be able to do a lot of work, and resists naturally a lot of what Torkoal is going to bring to the table. Rillaboom is a smart answer to that, but when you're up against an Incineroar as well, and your opponent doesn't need to set the rain up for the rest of the team to function with Goldengo, you're in a really tough spot. So James Evans navigated that masterfully. I think Thomas Hayden had a better game plan going into game 2. I expect, honestly, in a game 3 that he would have even been able to come a lot closer, or potentially even take it. But that being said, James Evans is the one that moves on here. So until next time, when we're going to be looking at the top cut of Pittsburgh Regionals, be safe, be smart, make wise decisions, and farewell.